Ladies and gentlemen, we are now ready for our keynote speaker. Elaine Wynn has defined modern-day Las Vegas. From her contributions as a businesswoman who helped build 2 gaming companies and redefine the Las Vegas gaming experience, to the role she has played in elevating the arts, education, and community life, Elaine has brought passion, vision, and activism to our city. Now in her role as the chairman of the State Board of Education, Elaine Wynn is leading the statewide governing body that sets K-12 education policy in Nevada. The mission of the State Board of Education is to elevate student performance by ensuring opportunity, facilitating learning, and promoting excellence in the classroom. In 2010, she was appointed by then Governor Jim Gibbons to co-chair the Education Reform Blue Ribbon Task Force, which made education reform recommendations to the state legislature. She's the founding chairman of the Communities and Schools of Nevada and is the current chairman of the National Board of Communities and Schools. She would not allow us to go through the many other organizations which she is participating in and leading. What we have in the world today is an abundance of critics. We see it in the media all the time. Our governmental leaders struggle with it, criticism. But what we need more of for us, for our kids, and for our future generations is role models. Role models of integrity, role models of doing the right thing, and role models of giving back for the sake of helping others. We are blessed in our community today to have one of those rare jewels. A role model of integrity, a role model of doing the right thing, and a role model of giving back to help others. Please help me welcome Elaine Wynn.
Whoa. Yo, Maggie. Oh, I really appreciate this invitation to be here. And as I shared with some of the chamber leadership before lunch began, as you might imagine, I've been invited to speak to lots of organizations and to have editorial review boards. But because of our ongoing situation, I've elected to sort of wait until the session was over. But I did make this exception because of the importance of this organization and their insistence that I join you today. And so I thank you for being aggressive and dynamic. It's a good thing that you all are and do. Last year, I attended a dinner honoring a friend of mine and 2 former military leaders for their work with special ops forces and their families. One of the generals, who was a distinguished Marine, came up to accept his award, and he began his remarks by saying that as he was about to leave his hotel room for dinner, his wife pointed out that he was wearing a mismatched suit. Well, much to his dismay, he had to decide rather quickly what to do. And he thought, well, if I change my pants, I gotta take off my belt, I gotta take off my shoes, what a hassle. So he decided to just change his jacket. Then he said, as I was about to come on stage, I realized I had left my speech in the inside pocket of my other coat. So just like the rest of you, I'm dying to hear what I have to say. I kind of feel like the general. I'm dying to hear what I have to say. And I feel that I'm probably going to support a lot of things that you've already heard. I can't ever remember feeling quite so pressured before making a speech as I do this one. Part of it is because of this ongoing changing landscape of education in our state. but also because of this new formal position I find myself in, and of course because of the deep complexity of the subject. As a private citizen, I've always been able to speak my mind pretty freely, and I can try to be constructive and forthright, even though my opinions may not be shared by everybody in the audience. But in my new position as State Board President, I am now a policymaker. And as a result, I have certain restrictions placed on me because technically I'm now an extension of the executive branch. I was appointed by and am accountable to the governor. The irony of this is that this all came about because of my work on this Blue Ribbon Commission, which created this whole new governance structure, as well as many other reforms that are unfolding now in a rather staccato and quirky way, as change often dictates. But in spite of this dichotomy, I'm going to try to do the best I can. You know that this topic deserves so much more time than what we have allotted today, and I do not pretend to be an expert on this subject. The longer I'm involved in education, the more humility I get. What sparks my passion and continues to motivate me is a great sense of frustration that I am sure is shared by all of you. What's going on in America and in our state is just a pattern that is unfair and unjust. It's not trite to say, and I'm going to repeat that, it's not trite to say that a strong democracy needs to be committed to equal opportunity for all of our children to have a good education. It's obvious. Preparing all of our kids for meaningful lives where they learn to be responsible citizens and have fulfilling careers has created the secret sauce of this country. But now our melting pot is curdling. The achievement gap of haves and have-nots is getting wider. There's compelling evidence that socioeconomic conditions ultimately determine the educational success of our children. There was a piece in Sunday's New York Times recently by a Stanford professor of education and sociology, Sean Reardon, and he said, this is intuitive, the children of the rich perform better in school on average than children from middle class or poor families. They have better grades, they have higher standardized test scores on average than poorer students. They also have higher rates of participation in extracurricular activities and school leadership positions, higher graduation rates, higher rates of college enrollment and completion. Unfortunately, the trend in this rich-poor gap is increasing. For those of us who lament this injustice, knowing that we can't magically make everybody rich, there is a sense of urgency to break this cycle of poverty. And we know it can only be done through education. Yet the system seems to be so resistant to change. Paradoxically, it appears to sustain the inequity. So what do we do is the billion-dollar question, and we know that's because it's about our survival. In my work as the National Chairman of Communities and Schools, I visit many places across the country where we have affiliates. It gives me a chance to observe those communities that are making progress, and I've gleaned some insight into what I think helps make it possible. The first thing I notice, which is something I call real civic engagement. Real civic engagement. Where there is an active coalition of government agencies, private businesses, philanthropic foundations, and community organizations who work with the education community, trust develops and the needle moves. I've seen it in places as geographically diverse as Jacksonville, Florida, Houston, Texas, Syracuse, New York, Harlem, New Orleans, and even areas in Los Angeles. But it doesn't happen in the absence of strong leadership. Usually there is a governor or a mayor or other political entity for whom this is a strong, if not main, priority of their political agenda. There are usually key corporations with outspoken CEOs. who weigh in. Colleges and universities participate in this alliance, as well as venture philanthropists. I believe it's extremely important to have these things in place in order to deal with what I think are the two most critical factors in successful systems: talent and resources. Quite simply put, and this is one of my key messages, I think without talented educational leadership and adequate financial resources, the prognosis is bad and systems are doomed. So let's turn home. When it comes to civic engagement, I think you're all able to judge the level and the quality that we have. Clearly, the components are here. Is there a strong alliance? When it comes to political leadership, this is an unfolding story. Speaking to efforts at the state level, if you're a policy wonk like I am, you can find online in great detail the 2013-14 Nevada State Improvement Plan for Education. It's an excellent summary of our current educational philosophy and what we intend to concentrate on. Highlights of Governor Sandoval's education plan have been broadly discussed throughout this legislative session. To a large degree, it is a continuation of many of those reforms that were contained in Nevada's promise, which was the work plan of our Blue Ribbon Commission. Some, but not all of the objectives are the continued streamlining of governance at the state level, expanding our data collection so we can acquire better information so that we can inform instruction and determine accountability, expansion of full-day kindergarten, prioritizing and increasing interventions for English language learners, limiting social promotion, introducing elements of choice, and on and on and on, so you can see how complex this is. But let's return to the broader discussion of talent. In recent years, I have been particularly encouraged by the infusion of new educational leadership that came to our state. Heath Morrison, a bright young superintendent of Washoe County, came from Montgomery County, Maryland, a place of intense innovation. In a short time, he was chosen Superintendent of the Year. He was extremely effective in both his school district and as a member of our Blue Ribbon Task Force. Much of the reform that was adopted by the legislature in 2011 from our Nevada plan was due to his input and his leadership. It's been extremely gratifying to work alongside Dwight Jones as well. I found him to be a tireless and courageous worker during the most difficult time of budget constraints with severe cutbacks and huge demographic challenges. And Superintendent Jim Guthrie is one of the most knowledgeable education scholars in America. I was honored to work with him. All of these gentlemen, in their own way, brought fresh perspective and dynamism to our state. They elevated the conversation, and they gave us the much-needed sense of urgency about changing the way we do business. For a variety of reasons, they're no longer here. We have strong and dedicated professionals, one permanent, Pedro Martinez in Reno, and two interim, Rory Fitzpatrick, who heads our state, who is here with us today as well, and Pat Skorkowski, who you met from Clark County, who are all marshaling much of the work begun by them. And we're counting on them to forge ahead. So where are we at this moment? If I'm forced to say, it would be not at a good place. I hate reminding everyone of our dreadful statistics. It's painful every time. Highest dropout rates in the country, lowest graduation rates, especially for our minority children, poor academic performance on national tests. Education Week, which is our kind of Bible, Education Week's Chance of Success Index says that a child born in Nevada has the absolute worst chance in the nation of growing up to be a success, worse than Mississippi or the District of Columbia. That's terrible. So let us stipulate that throughout the state, there are many gifted teachers and principals. We saw one today. Let's stipulate that we've started many nationally acclaimed programs like Teach for America and Communities in Schools, that we have many caring and engaged parents, that we've got many generous companies and foundations and faith-based organizations who support targeted programs, and that we acknowledge having made some incremental progress with lots of kids who are doing well. It would not be enough. If we were to equate the performance of Nevada students to a P&L statement, we would be facing bankruptcy. Anyone who doesn't understand this is in denial, and if it's the first time you're hearing it, I'm sorry to be the messenger. We're now in the process of selecting 2 new leaders, one at the state level and one here in Clark County. All of us in business understand that finding the best possible talent to lead our companies and staff them is the single most important decision we make. In my opinion, how we go about this and what we do will greatly decide the future of education in our state. We've got to have a system of accountability that's managed through our educational leaders. It's the correct course to pursue, even if it comes in fits and bursts. The process is going to be different in each case because of the governance structures, but finding that best executive talent should be our mutual goals. We each should cast as broad a net as possible to seek out the most highly qualified persons able to fit our circumstances, especially with some of the limitations we have. The criteria for selection must involve embracing bold experimentation and innovation. It's the only thing that's showing promise elsewhere in the country. And this need not rule out consideration of in-house, homegrown, local talent, but it should not, in my opinion, be restricted to that. We need leaders who will insist on hiring, training, and retaining effective teachers and principals, who support our efforts to measure them fairly, but who will push to have them removed if they cannot do the job. The only job protection should be meritorious service. Adults should not be protected at the expense of children. And last, we get to resources, which could also have been first, money. Do we have enough, and is it properly allocated? I attended a dinner the other night with Eli Broad, one of the most respected education philanthropists in our country. Among other things, he's created the Broad Prize, given annually to the best performing school district in the United States. We were talking about Nevada, and he asked me what our annual per pupil expenditure was in the state. When I told him, he just shook his head, and he said, "You will never get anywhere with that." Now, I am not able to discuss tax policy, but I am comfortable concurring that, and this is my political correctness, conceptually speaking, we are grossly underfunded. Grossly underfunded. Student achievement, with few rare exceptions, is definitely linked to the amount of resources in educational systems. If we ever have the luxury of having adequate resources, I believe that the individual district should have the flexibility to allocate them to serve their own individual needs. Local school boards and superintendents should be making those decisions and then held accountable. There are so many other valuable topics that we haven't had a chance to discuss, like the pending impact of the new Common Core standards, the testing that's going to happen to measure proficiency, which will be a whole other nightmare, I fear, needing the patience of the community, school choice, professional development for teachers, increased focus on emotional intelligence, blended learning, on and on. You can see, boy, this is a lot of work. But to my mind, if we don't address the key themes that I summarized, civic engagement to sound the clarion call, political leadership to champion it, talent to execute and inspire, and significant resources to invest, the rest of this conversation is just tinkering around the edges. If I can give you any takeaways today, it is, as you have heard, you do have a role to play. Start paying attention if you're not already doing so. Read the excellent article in the issue of the Chamber's magazine this month, very well researched and thoughtfully presented. Watch the superintendent's selection processes. Contact your school board member to give an opinion, all of us. And we have put on the table email addresses for everyone, but if you're so inclined, pick up the phone. Sorry, my brethren and sistren. Contact your school board members. Watch the lawmaking and watch the lawmakers. Being informed may elevate your passion. There are more consequences for inaction than action. For me, until we can impact all of our students, I just try to help save one kid at a time, but time is running out. Thank you. Okay.